Welcome, everybody, to the next installment of our YouTube series on professional philosophy and its myths. Today, we're going to be talking about something called adjunctification, a process that has been taking place in higher education for several decades and is an expression of the neoliberal takeover of higher education, especially in the United States, although similar trends are now happening in other countries. And if you don't know what adjunctification refers to or who adjuncts are, don't feel bad about that, because academics, we often treat the existence of adjuncts as a secret to be kept from the public. Many students who are pursuing their degrees at colleges and universities across the United States are taught by people that they don't know have this very particular labor status of being an adjunct. And today we are here to talk about adjuncts, the adjunct experience, and adjunctification with Herb Childress, who is the author of the book we're going to be referring to today. And the title of that book is The Adjunct Underclass: How America's Colleges Betrayed Their Faculty, Their Students, and Their Mission. This was published from the University of Chicago Press in 2019.
Yeah, and in our book, the reason we're having Herb here on our interview series today is because in our book we introduce a figure called the philosopher as adjunct, who exists at the very bottom of the hierarchy of professional academic philosophy. And so, in writing this chapter, Herb, your book was absolutely invaluable. It was a treasure trove of interviews with current and formal adjuncts. And it really contains a very sharp and pointed analysis of how adjuncts function within higher education and what it reflects about higher education more broadly and what it does to people. So we are very excited to speak with you. So welcome, Herb.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
All right. Well, let's get started with the very simple, seemingly simple question, which is what exactly is an adjunct and what is life like for adjuncts?
I'm glad you called it seemingly simple because it really isn't. When we think of the term adjunct faculty, the easiest answer and the most common is a person who is paid to teach one course for one semester for one specific dollar amount. There is no guarantee of continuity from semester to semester or year to year. There is no connection to anything else within the curriculum. There is no connection to departmental or academic structure. It is a very constrained performance contract. And when a faculty member is not renewed, it may be for performance reasons, but it may also be simply because a course didn't fill the next semester, or the course was shifted in the curriculum and was no longer required for freshmen, or something like that. So the adjunct faculty are those contingent faculty, and the contingent idea is it depends. And what does it depend on? It depends on if we have enough students. It depends on if we have enough demand to open up a section of this course for you to conduct. Right. The larger sense of adjunct, though, and one that I discovered while writing this book, is an enormous number of people who are loosely affiliated with the academic enterprise. People in tutoring centers, people in writing centers, people in academic computing, people in other kinds of student support services, many of whom have come from academic backgrounds and who will remain attached to the academic enterprise, but who are not faculty members, who do not get to sort of steer the intellectual ship. So there's a large population of folks who are, in fact, employed. They have full-time jobs with benefits and all of that, but they're adjacent to the role for which they were trained. So when I think about adjuncts, I think about that larger definition of people who are affiliated but not integrated with the enterprise.
Yeah, and I want to just add on to that. I mean, further complicating the question is you also have folks who are technically on contract. So, for example, postdoctoral fellows who are people who are given a salary of some size, sometimes larger than others, for a limited term, so like 2 years, and their
Right.
their relationship to the service component or the steering of the academic department is usually fairly marginal, although it varies a great
Right.
deal. You also have lecture track faculty that have a sort of pseudo tenure structure. So the labor structure of the university is far more complex than the tenured faculty and then all the rest, right? There's a
Right.
huge, as you say, an underclass of people, right, who do probably in some cases the majority of the teaching in college.
Right. And the American Association of University Professors found that nearly half of faculty who are described as full-time are not tenure track. They are on one of these professor of the practice or visiting scholar or any postdocs, any number of things that have a very constrained period of time attached to them. And one of the things that we don't think about is that also is not only is it a constrained period of time, it offers no opportunity for advancement, and it offers no protections for intellectual freedom that we think of as being inherent in the scholarly enterprise, right? Just as graduate students don't enjoy the freedoms of academic protection, right? That's reserved for our superiors. That's reserved for our betters, right? Who will be eternally protected.
But, well, maybe not eternally, since the tenure system is increasingly being eroded. Yeah, I am one of the privileged ones to be in the tenure stream, and we are now also being told that that might be going away. But it does mean that there is a two-class system that in our book, we think about it as marked by three features, right? There is, on the one hand, the economic dimension. Adjuncts make a lot less money for doing more work than those of us who are on the tenure stream or already tenured. We also talk about it in terms of an imbalance in access to the means of academic governance. Whereas, so I, as a tenured faculty member, I make decisions about what students do we include, do we accept, how scholarship funds are distributed, what classes are offered next semester, what does our curriculum look like. Adjuncts are not allowed a voice in a lot of those conversations, at least not formally, right? Not by academic policy or by rule. And another thing that we talk about, and this goes to the reference to it being an open secret that we don't like to talk about, is the sense of invisibility, that most students are in a place that has this hierarchy, but they don't see the hierarchy. And sometimes those of us who are in the hierarchy on the higher end also don't see the hierarchy for various political reasons. And so in your work, you've talked about, of course, the political dimension, the economic dimension, and the optic dimension, but you also talk about the social and the psychological dimension. And you interviewed a lot of adjuncts on the way to writing this book. So can you share with us what all your interviews revealed about how being an adjunct in this fungible position that is not properly remunerated, what kind of effect that has psychologically and socially on individuals who find themselves in that position?
It's a great question. Like any stress response, we have different reactions to it. One of the things that about this career is that we have all gotten here because we've been told any number of times that we were the best student that X cohort has ever seen, whether that was kindergarten or sixth grade or high school or as an undergraduate or as a master's student, right? We have succeeded. We have passed all of those bars, right? And so we have learned to trust meritocracy, right? And so then you have passed this ultimate bar. There are no more bars, right? We have made the leap, and now there's nothing there. There's nothing there. There's no more structure. There are no more assignments. There's no more rewards. And there's no explanation as to why one individual has succeeded, whereas another has failed, right? So we have become very invested in a way of thinking with regards to our discipline. We've become very invested in a kind of free-range lifestyle in which we are given the opportunity to study things that we care about and to take our time, right? We are not pressed to be rapid with our dissertations, God knows. So we have gone from this environment where we've been good at it. We've been told that we're good at it. We've had the opportunity to have the kind of really intellectual curiosity fed, excuse me, and then nothing, right? And so it's no surprise that people want to stay close to the mothership because that's where the food was, right? That's where our rewards were. And so, I know how to be this person. I know how to do this thing. I will continue to do this thing, even though the reward structure has just evaporated, right? And a lot of people really don't have a comfortable release from that. They stay with it longer than any objective measure might suggest that they should. Because it's so identity based. It is who we are. Right? And so that sense of disrupted identity is really at the core of so many of the conversations that I had with people. That, I used to be this thing and now I'm not quite, but I can still have adjacency to it. Hence adjunct, right? I can remain adjunct to the enterprise. And that's something. It's not enough, but it's something.
Incredible answer. It's funny you mentioned, trauma responses, and I'm listening to you talk and I'm just thinking, oh my God, I'm still like this. I'm still trying to just squeeze a little more blood out of that stone. And I think,
Yeah.
I as somebody who is, unlike David in this position, I'm in the last year of a postdoc. I find myself thinking the same thing. And your point about it being, the sort of way we train scholars generally, although we, in our book, we talk about it, it's specific articulation in philosophy. But I think this is true of the academic enterprise generally, where it does become a kind of vocational thing. It's not like, I'm going to go to business school to work at an investment firm and make a lot of money, right?
Right.
Nobody goes into academia to make a lot of money.
Right.
And so I think you're really touching on something that is sort of uniquely, is very cruel, I think, at bottom, or sort of cruel predicament to find oneself in.
It is. And there's so little understanding among undergraduates, especially, of what a faculty member is, right? When I decided, I had finished undergrad at Berkeley after a couple of failed starts at college. I finished my undergrad when I was 31 instead of 21. And I loved Berkeley. I loved everything about it. It was the intellectual paradise, right? And so I thought to myself, I'm going to go to graduate school because I want to be a college teacher. And that's how I phrased it. And that's not what a faculty member is, or at least not all of what a faculty member is, right? And so I wanted to remain part of this enterprise that I had come to love so deeply, right? And I wanted to be the person who could lead other young people into the joys of this just remarkable garden, right? And so I did not set myself up for an academic career. I didn't know what that was. I wanted to be a college teacher. And I knew the PhD was the credential that you need to be a college teacher. It's looking back on it, it was just so poorly informed. But we do a lot of things that are poorly informed. Right?
Yeah, I mean, again, absolutely. I feel like your voice is coming outside of my own, from inside my own head. But yeah, I wanted to turn to the question of faculty, because in your book, at the very, very beginning, you frame your whole book as with this very bold statement. I want you to elaborate on that a little bit for our audience. So you say adjunctification is symptomatic of the defeat of college faculty. Of course, college faculty here being the traditional thing you have in your mind of the tenured professor who does research, service,
Right.
is fully an integrated member of the community at a particular institution.
Right.
So what is this defeat of the college faculty, and how is it related to the rise of adjuncts and adjuncting, the adjunctification crisis in higher education? I mean, David, I don't know if you knew you were defeated.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly sometimes feel like it.
Right. So it's interesting, and I'm going to reframe your question a little bit, because when I saw that, I thought to myself, did I actually say that? And so I, because I haven't read the book for a while, so I opened up the Word document and I did a search on the word defeat. And what it actually says in the first couple of pages is I told my editor that I would not write a sort of combat narrative about the beleaguered faculty and the triumphant administrators and the battlefield nonsense, right? For me, the metaphor is not defeat. The metaphor is extinction.
Mhm.
That we have an ecosystem that does not support this species any longer because the economics have changed, because the demographics have changed, because the expectation that 70% of our high school graduates are going to go on to college has changed. The entire enterprise has changed. The lake is not the same lake. And so it's no surprise that some of the species are dying back, right? And the faculty, I think, are one of those species. One of the things that we see as a great increase over the last 20 years is non-educational professionals as a proportion of the university makeup. Something like a 26% increase over the last 15 years, right? That's all the people who run all the student support organizations, all of the sort of accrediting support organizations, all of the evaluation and assessment organizations, all of your IT. There's a huge professional class that has taken great root in this ecosystem. And the nutrients are not flowing to faculty in the way that they once did. Right. So I think we're seeing an extinction event. I don't think we're seeing a fight.
Yeah. And I mean, I like this metaphor of extinction, which might be more than a metaphor, especially when you think about things like administrative bloat, the fact that faculty numbers are dwindling. There is this crisis of identity that the faculty in the broadest possible sense are experiencing that is also now filtering onto the students as well, where a lot of students are wondering, like, what is this place that I call a university and what exactly is its mission when things like student fees are going up, but student services are going down. And you mentioned you haven't read your own book in a couple of years. It's been 6 years since it came out, but I'm curious about whether you see any changes in the last few years since the book has been published in the landscape of adjunctification, the politics of higher ed. Where do you think we are at, or has it been the same thing, but maybe continuing this process of intensification?
Right. So I don't want to overstep my mark here. This book was sort of my divorce document. I have not been closely affiliated with higher ed for the last 6 years. What I have done is talk to an enormous number of people who've read this and have reached out to me. So what I've learned since reading this is that it is truly an international phenomenon. I've had people write to me from Europe, from Australia, New Zealand, from Asia, saying, yes, us too. Yes, we are also experiencing these same forces, right? So I think that, again, it suggests a sort of an ecological change that affects not merely American state colleges, but affects the notion of higher education. We can't talk about the politics of higher education without talking about our current moment, right? In which everything is fraught, everything can, awarded grants can be taken back, right? So that is another force of instability that makes it difficult for a university to invest in permanence. The degree to which faculty are grant supported in their research, again, makes permanence difficult because your soft money contract will evaporate in 3 years. Will you be somebody, because of your own intrinsic nature, worth our investment? Or are you here to fulfill a contract that we have with NIH or NSF or NASA or whatever, right? So I think that the forces of instability remain and perhaps increase. The effects of that on the ground within individual institutions, I have not had my fingers on that pulse since 2020, probably. This really was a divorce declaration. This really was my saying, I say that, of course, I am working right now as an academic consultant for a group of universities in Arizona who are getting grant funding, right?
Mhm.
I'm a sucker enough, and staying close to the enterprise is good. And when my friends ask me for a favor, I feel like the dog that's being patted on the head, right? Good dog, come on, we still love you. Come on back, right? So I've booked 5 years worth of evaluation work because somebody said I was a good dog, right? So there it is, right?
Yeah, no, and I think we kind of share at least that sense of in connection to this project and in connection to our book of writing out of a sense to release something that had been pent up for some time, because this book, Professional Philosophy and its Myths, was largely a recognized attempt to make sense of who we are relative to this discipline that we entered at the same time and that we didn't really know, especially as people from marginalized backgrounds, from lower socioeconomic upbringings, not really, we didn't know who we were to higher ed and to academic philosophy. And by extension, we didn't know what it meant to us. And so there was a lot of catharsis and a lot of therapy that went into writing this book that was very helpful for both of us in our different positionalities in this
Yeah,
fraught landscape of higher
right,
education.
right.
This is one
And
thing
it's
I've very
interesting. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
Oh, I was just going to just add quickly. I really appreciate about your book is that it's addressed to curious undergrads or people who might not know. So I really appreciate that you pitched it to a pretty broad audience, not just people in the academy. Although I'm sure it connected very differently from somebody who's been through that process than somebody who's just thinking, should I go to college? But yes, please do go on. I
Right.
apologize.
Well, I mean, somebody like, to follow that point, somebody like Marc Bousquet, who has written extensively about the end of the faculty, has written very pointedly that the PhD should now be construed as the end of one's academic career rather than the beginning, right? His work is really aimed at his academic colleagues. He is trying to work from within the mansion to change the structures that we accidentally uphold because we don't ask questions about them, right? Mine was clearly aimed at a broader, more public audience to say, here's some things that you should know, right? And nobody's being evil. Nobody's trying to hurt you. Nobody's trying to hurt these PhD students. It's just that the nature of the system has changed so much that the rewards that you have gotten throughout your life may not be there for you, right?
Yeah, and I think this ecosystem metaphor is pretty useful. And I think it's especially helpful for people who may feel, sort of personally slighted.
Right.
And this actually brings us nicely to, I could talk to you all day about all kinds of things from your book. I was so thrilled to have you on. And I actually think that the fact that you wrote it for a broader audience is one of the reasons I was excited to have you on, because I think a lot of our listeners would really be able to read this and have a really good understanding, a better understanding than some people within the adjunctification scene might otherwise have. But this brings me to our final question that we have time for, which is, in our book, a lot of what we do is offer a diagnosis of what we think is amiss, right, with professional academic philosophy. And we gesture towards what we think a better philosophy would look like. And you do something somewhat similar in the book where you talk about, what you would hope for from an education system. So with after everything that we've said, everything we've touched on about the adjunctification crisis and how it affects people, what would a better world look like? Even I'm not asking you to sort of outline a program for reforming higher education.
Right.
What would be what would you want to see in a university that you're not seeing now? What would be something worth striving for, right?
Yeah. There's a smaller and a larger answer to that. The smaller answer is honesty, right? Let people know who's teaching you. Let people know what your placements have looked like for the last 5 years in your program. Let people know the names and addresses of alumni that they can call and talk to about their experiences. Let people know that an undergraduate degree from school A is not the same as an undergraduate degree from school B. And the same is true for a doctorate, that a doctorate from this institution is not the same as another. I'll back up a little, tell you a story. I was talking with my editor about a friend who had finished her PhD and was struggling on the job market. And I had mentioned that she had gotten her PhD in anthropology from University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And my editor immediately said, she never had a chance. She never had a chance. That sense of positioning is so under-discussed, right? I went to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, which was not by any means an elite research university. But I had a great time. Where did my faculty come from? From Michigan, from Yale, from Syracuse, from the Iowa Writers Workshop, right? So as we overpopulate the system, even smaller schools, even less elite schools have faculty who have come from enormously high-powered places. You can have a wonderful doctoral experience from a quote-unquote low-ranked program, but it will not be a useful step stool to climb into the faculty ranks, right? So just that sense of honesty, just that sense of you should know what you're about to embark on, right? And the fact that we're putting 55,000 people a year into an ecosystem that can absorb 15,000, and that you're competing with people who didn't get jobs the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that, right? The larger question is really a sense of community, right? That we are a commons. We are a group of people embarked on something we all believe passionately in. It is our responsibility to care for one another. It is our responsibility to make each other do better. It is a responsibility to make each other learn something all the time, right? And if we cannot support our community, you're clearly not doing something right. If we're willing to say that a quarter of college freshmen won't become college sophomores, we're doing something wrong. If we're willing to say that this person teaching first-year writing is going to make $2,700 for a semester, we're doing something wrong, right? So just that sense of care for community, I think, is the sort of underlying force that would help us think differently in policy terms, right? You can't get the policy right until you have the motive right.
Yeah, and that sense of community seems so basic yet so unthinkable under current economic and political conditions.
Right.
And it's something that I think our projects here share. How do we build a sense of an academic community when the very fabrics of that community seem to be fraying from every angle? And I know we're out of time, but I do want to ask you another version of the same question that Rebecca just posed to you, because a lot of the people that listen to our podcast and watch this YouTube channel are people who have considered or are considering going to graduate school, sometimes in philosophy, but also in other disciplines, including other humanistic fields and other like the natural sciences. I'm just curious how you would answer a student, because we get these emails quite frequently, at least once a week.
Right.
Should I go to graduate school? It's my passion, but I am worried about not really having a future that I envision, so under what conditions should one make the choice to go to graduate school in this climate?
There's a real sense of privilege about how we might answer that question, right? If you can afford to be an explorer, if you can afford to follow your intellectual passions and just trust that you're going to land on your feet, then by all means, we encourage that person to go forth and embark, right? It is a much more fraught question for somebody who really is more economically or culturally tenuous, right? Who is relying on the success of this decision to make them into a next decision, right? So the question can't be as simple as yes, you should or no, you shouldn't, right? The question has to become, what do you hope to be true because you're doing this? Are there other ways to have that become true without going through this structure, right? You might, for instance, watch a YouTube channel on the popularization of philosophy. You might learn, right? There are, and the whole higher education enterprise is founded on the idea that knowledge is scarce and we have to protect it and dole it out. Well, knowledge isn't scarce anymore, right? So there may be other ways for us to do this fantastic thing that don't rely on the institutional structure, right? If you need a credential, then yes, you can do it that way. If you need the experience, there may be other ways to do the experience, right? But again, going back to the idea of honesty, we have to be really honest that if we have just started a PhD program in our 64th ranked college, if I draw students into my program, I'm committing malpractice, right? I am not setting them up for a faculty career. I may be setting them up for a wonderful intellectual experience, but I'm not setting them up to make the next stage, right? As just a party game, you might look up the National Research Council's rankings of all 4,800 departments in the U.S. that can offer a PhD. Look at the 90 schools in philosophy and guess beforehand what the top 10 are. You can do it.
Yeah, they're the
You know you
Ivies.
could, right?
Yeah.
Well, not all the Ivies, but yeah. So those are the schools from which faculty are drawn, even at smaller state regional comprehensive schools, right?
Mhm.
So if you get a PhD from a regional comprehensive school, you've bought a currency that can't be exchanged.
Mhm. Well, Herb, thank you so much for this conversation. It's such a pressing issue, especially for those students who are, at this pivotal moment in their young adult lives, trying to
Right.
make a decision that has long-term ramifications downstream for their personal and their professional lives. And I think getting an honest look at what academia looks like, that behind the scenes, at the economics, at the politics, at the exploitation that feeds the current landscape in higher education, because it is built on that. And your book does a wonderful job at presenting this in an accessible and intellectually rigorous way. And so we thank you not just for your time today in this discussion, but also for the labor that you put into this book.
Thank you so much. It's just been a delight to talk with you both, and I hope that we will continue off camera many times.
Thank you. And
A real treat.
And to our listeners and viewers, we recommend that you check out The Adjunct Underclass by Herb Childress.